Today on Everyday Injustice, we have DA candidate in Riverside, California, Lara Gressley. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, you are taking on Michael Hestrin, who, for those of you who might not be aware, is probably one of the worst DAs around. Why is he so bad?
Well, here's the thing. So what we're dealing with in Riverside County, and we've been dealing with for decades, is this very myopic, tough on crime mentality that doesn't seem to really take into account anything outside of the scope of punishment. So, we see overcharging, which gives leverage for defendants to plead guilty early and to plead to, things that they didn't do. That happens a lot. We see this aggressive approach that really is not making us any safer. Violent crime is up, nearly 30% since 2014, and he's been in office since 2015. So whatever he's doing is just not working, right? So there's this idea of, people think, well, you have to be tough on crime, you have to be hard on crime. That's what these certain individuals want, but yet that's not making them safer. So it seems like we have to do something different. It makes all sorts of, sense to do something different, not just from the perspective of we need reform, we need more fairness, more balance, more reasonableness, but also just from a public safety perspective. So, my approach is very logical, it's very holistic, and it takes into account, from even before a crime is committed. So I'm big on crime prevention. I have lots of ideas about that. And then through the entire process, from the moment that a case is filed, we have to be cognizant of what we're doing, how we are going to impact many lives, not just the defendants and not just the victims, but many lives through the community, because there's this sort of ripple effect that occurs, when a case is filed and prosecuted, and how it's prosecuted or settled or resolved or what happens in the case. And then also after conviction, right? Because we have people getting convicted, they do their time or do whatever they're required to do, and then they come back into our community and they can't get a job, they can't get a house, they can't support their family, and they go back to committing more crimes, re-victimizing people. So it's just not working. We have to change the sort of program, and that's where I come in.
And one of the interesting things, and we've been watching this kind of around the country, is that, if a crime happens in San Francisco, it automatically gets blamed on Chesa Boudin, the DA. But, and we see it up here in Sacramento, big crime happens, just a massacre in Sacramento happened a few weeks ago. But there's no mention of Anne-Marie Schubert when those things happen. And the same thing's happening down there in Riverside. As you pointed out, crime's up in Riverside, and yet the tough on crime DA doesn't seem to get touched by that.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that requires sort of informing the voters, informing the citizens of exactly what we're talking about, and the evidence-based data that we have. We have so many studies that have been done about this that are, very trustworthy. We have statistics, we have all kinds of proof. And I think the goal is to educate people, because there's this fear, really it's fear, right? I mean, there's this fear that if we don't lock everybody up and we don't have this tough on crime approach, then nobody's safe. But what we see actually when we do the work and we study it and we learn about what's actually happening, we find out that we are less safe when we're not taking this holistic approach, when we're not making rehabilitation the priority, when we're not making crime prevention the priority, and we're only punishing so that we can look, tough on crime and get reelected. I mean, that's kind of what's been happening. It's like, let's put fear in everybody. So what's interesting is the first article that came out about my candidacy this time around, the response from Mike Hestrin was, well, crime is up, right? So, sort of this don't elect another DA or another candidate because crime is up, so you want me, this kind of fear approach. And then we see it's been switched in the process and the debates that we've had, where it's like, oh no, this is the safest place to live. So, it's kind of like, well, which one is it? Is crime up, and you want to put fear in people, or did you figure out that actually makes you look like you're not doing a good job, and now you switch it to, so the point is, I think we have politicians, right, that are just going out there and saying what they say and hoping it sticks and gets them elected. But I am here to tell you, I am not your typical politician. In fact, I don't call myself a politician. I'm a lawyer, and I'm a political candidate in this because I want reform, and I know that I can do the job to make us all safer if I get into that office. But I'm telling the truth about everything. And what I see, I'm a researcher, I'm an appellate attorney. I do research constantly, and I love it. And one of the things that I've been researching are crime statistics and death penalty statistics, and just really getting educated so that I can then educate the voters. And that's what I'm trying to do. Crime is up, and this tough on crime mentality is not making us safer. We cannot be afraid of reform. We have to embrace it, because we have to look at the evidence. We have to look at exactly what's going on. And this holistic approach that I am proposing, that I will do, is going to help us be safer. I have a family here. I want to be safe. I want my child to be able to walk to school and feel safe in our communities. And it just seems like, there's this fear, like with Chesa Boudin or George Gascon, of course, is the big topic down here, right? That if you elect a reform-minded candidate, then you're going to get somebody who's soft on crime, is going to release everybody, and, it's going to be a miserable experience. Well, what I can say about that, just to sort of dispel some of those fears, is that I am not going to overcorrect. I'm going to correct. So what that means to me is, and I use this analogy, and I've used it several times because in my mind it's a perfect explanation, is I am going to just make sure the ship is going straight ahead and reaches its destination of justice and doesn't sink. So that's the goal, right? Is to make sure that we keep the ship straight ahead. We don't need to overcorrect. We don't need to turn hard left because we've been hard right, or whatever, the right left analogy is. The point is that we need balance. We need fairness. We need honest, representation. And that is exactly what I'm going to do is reform things that make sense and make sure that everybody understands I am not soft on crime, but I'm not hard on crime. I am just on crime.
And I think, what's kind of gotten lost in all of this narrative, is a point that Fordham Law professor John Pfaff made, which is that, yeah, crime's up, but crime's up on tough on crime's watch. I mean, there really hasn't been a lot of reform, even in places like San Francisco. When you get down to it and you get into the courthouse, really doesn't look very different than it looks down in Riverside. And we've covered our share of cases down there. If you walk into a courtroom, you generally don't see a huge difference from county to county.
Yeah, I mean, well, you see a difference. So I can tell you from a defense attorney's perspective, you do see a difference big time in Riverside County, like, going to LA County and doing a case and then come to Riverside County. In fact, many defense attorneys, and they've told me this for many years, they will not step foot into Riverside County. And the reason is because we don't have, we don't have line deputies with discretion to settle cases. We don't get reasonable offers. You have to fight tooth and nail for it. Cases go on forever, and they may only settle when you finally get in front of a judge. So it's a very sort of time-consuming and lengthy process to defend a case here, where the case should resolve, quickly and fairly and easily. So in that respect, I do find that Riverside County has traditionally been absolutely different in that sense. But you're right in that, crime is happening everywhere, right? We see some reform, in places like San Francisco and LA, and the reason is because they're, like I said, they're correcting the wrong. In my opinion, it might be overcorrecting. That's just how I feel about it because of the blanket policies that I don't subscribe to. But having said that, there have been, I mean, I think there was an LA Times article on the George Gascon situation, and they were saying it, really there's no proof that it's up because of George Gascon. So again, people put a spin on stuff and they kind of go with it. And there's just all this fear mongering, I feel like, like, oh, if we try to reform this, it's going to be so bad. And so that's when it's really important to do your own research. And honestly, that's what I've been doing, is my own research and just trying to get the message out there that, look, I want balance. I want fairness. I want truth. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want appropriate punishment and innocent set free? That it just seems like something that we could universally agree on, regardless of party affiliation or status or whatever. Everybody can say, yeah, innocent person, set them free, and somebody who's guilty, get them appropriate punishment, and make sure that we can do what we are able to do to rehabilitate them, because let's not forget that they're coming back into our community after they serve time or their felony conviction or whatever. And we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to protect the public even after that, right? I mean, that makes sense.
So we kind of jump right into the weeds, which is fun. But for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background and where you come from and why you're running for DA.
Sure. So I'm originally from Northern California, as you probably know. And sort of did this kind of roundabout detour when I began practicing law and ended up in Riverside County. I got a job here as deputy county counsel. It was my first job in Riverside County. And then I quickly sort of figured out that land use litigation and sitting with the planning commission wasn't exactly what I wanted to do with my career, although I respect the attorneys there, absolutely. But I wanted to be in the courtroom. That's really what I always wanted to do. I had worked at the Santa Cruz Public Defender's Office when I was up there. And so I ended up getting a job with the PD, the public defender in Riverside. And then pretty quickly moved on to the conflict panel, which was more my speed because you got to be independent. It was my own law practice, and just got cases that were court appointed and, sort of was my own boss, which apparently I like. So I tried cases. I was on the felony trial team in Riverside. And, I've been just working here for a really long time. I ended up going to private practice a few years later, really enjoyed, being in private practice, got to sort of delve into stuff that I love, post-conviction work, appellate work, and lecture lawyers around the state on all kinds of things, from motions to trials to appeals and making a record and all that kind of stuff. Did some work in the U.S. Supreme Court, really, really cool experiences there. And I just have this passion for the law and for justice and righting wrongs, and so appellate work was really up my alley. I love research and writing. The scholarly sort of academic aspect of the law is kind of what I love so much. But what happened was, all these years I've seen so many injustices, right? And just watching people just sort of get, railroaded. I mean, there's really no other way to say it. And it sounds cliche, but it's true because of this overcharging that I've seen, and just the sort of lack of any kind of reasonableness in resolving cases here. So I have a story, though, because I have a friend who was wrongfully convicted. He's an innocent man who was wrongfully convicted and spent 13 years in prison. I met him because I'm a singer as well, and I was in a band, so that was my I would do trial by day. And
We've seen your Facebook.
Yeah. So I would go, I haven't shown too much of the, the big band ones, but the acoustic projects I put up there. But yeah, I would do that by night. And anyway, he was the sound engineer and we became friends. This was, maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago. And then I learned his story. And I think that kind of woke me up in a way because, you get used to you get jaded and you get used to just kind of seeing these injustices and trying to make them right and, fighting the good fight and all that. But what woke me up was that this actually really happens, and really just learning about how it went down. And it was out of Riverside County. And, I just felt like, what can I do? How can I use my life and my career, my skill set to make a difference? And I pretty much figured out, honestly, that if I could save one person from being wrongfully convicted, that would be enough. It would be enough for me because I saw what he went through and what he still goes through with the stigma of that conviction. It's just a terrible, terrible tragedy. And, along the way, because I decided to run for DA, because I realized, oh my gosh, this is the way that I can, change things, like really change things. And then sort of getting into all the other areas that I could impact positively for everybody, convinced me that this was a calling, that I really needed to do this. And, along the way, I've met mothers of children who are wrongfully convicted, who are innocent, and just hearing their stories and really becoming passionate about that kind of work. I have my own clients that are in prison right now. I do habeas work, as you probably know. And I focus my time, because I am still working, by the way, and campaigning. It's not easy, but I do habeas work. So essentially what I'm trying to do is get innocent people out of prison. And, you reach sort of a brick wall at some point when the court won't overturn it. I have a case right now that the court has not overturned. It's been all the way to the California Supreme Court. I have 2 expert witnesses that say my client is innocent in their opinion, and she's in prison for life. So we're now going to the federal courts for that. And really what I came to realize in doing habeas work as well, and because of my friend's story, is that the DA is the one who can impact this the most. The DA is the one who decides, who to file against, and the DA is the one who decides ultimately whether they want to consent to vacating a conviction in a habeas case, whether there is proof of innocence. And once I learned that, it was confirmation that, yeah, I'm on the right track here. This is something that I need to do. And really, it's been a difficult thing because, I obviously have been on the other side of the fence. I've been a defense attorney, and that's how I've been fighting against injustice. And now I want to fight for justice. Some people don't understand, why I want to do this, but really, I've always been somebody who just believes in justice. And, I could have easily been a prosecutor. I was offered, I think, 3 different times, once in Riverside. I was offered the job and I just never took it. Ultimately, in Riverside, the reason was because I didn't agree with the sort of tyrannical approach, that happens in that office. So I turned it down. And that was the right choice for me. But the thing is, I am not against law enforcement just because I've been a defense attorney. I am for law enforcement. I want to help them. I want to support them. I want to use my skills and my knowledge, especially with constitutional law, to train officers on how to do things the right way, so that people's rights aren't violated. And I want to implement, ethics training in the prosecutor's office, because I find that we're still dealing with prosecutorial misconduct happening. And a lot of times, the vast majority of times, it's just a mistake, right? It's a lack of training. I don't think that prosecutors get into this business to just break the rules. But we have to do something different, because in my research, I found that, the wrongful convictions that have happened in a fairly recent study was 39% of those were prosecutorial misconduct. They were overturned for that reason. So we just have to do things differently, and I am fighting hard, to make changes, and it's not easy. As you know, as a no party preference candidate, I have taken a hard stance on that, because it's who I am, and I feel that if I change who I am, I feel I've already lost. I have to be who I am, let people know who I am. They can trust me. I'm authentic. I'm honest from the beginning. Does it make it difficult? Yes, it does, because I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. But again, this is a nonpartisan race. So I believe that this is the purest and the best and the most honest way to run for this office, is to let everybody know I am going to serve you. Doesn't matter who you are, I'm going to serve you in this county. So hopefully that was a long-winded, but there, of what I'm trying to do and why I'm doing it.
Well, it's interesting listening to your story, because I actually got into this space in kind of a similar way. I was doing news, and a family called me up and said that their loved one had been wrongly convicted. This is back in 2009, and I didn't know what wrongful convictions were even. And so, I go to this guy's sentencing hearing. He had just been convicted, and suddenly he gets 378 years in prison. And it's just an eye-opening thing for the crime that he was convicted of, which is not a good crime. But you wouldn't have thought that it'd be, like the equivalent of 4 or 5 life sentences. And, interestingly enough, on last Friday, I went to his latest habeas hearing. And it's exactly as you described. I mean, the DA is fighting tooth and nail. They've done all these interviews in prison just trying to trap this guy. And it's unbelievable how much resources they've put into keeping an innocent guy in prison. And absolutely, the DA matters, because with a DA with your mentality, I think it'd be a very different story as to what would be taking place right now. So in terms of what you want to do if you are elected, what are some of your policy goals?
Well, so number one, I mean, obviously I've been harping on this a lot, is I'm going to end overcharging. So, we're not going to overcharge cases anymore. That's sort of an overarching principle that will be implemented immediately. And that's, again, going to take training. It's going to take guidelines for filing deputies. It's going to be, not something that I can snap my fingers and make it happen right away. But that is absolutely going to be a major priority, because I can give you several instances of cases in which this has occurred, and it's been going on for some time. And I think that we have to kind of almost like reprogram the mindset, in the DA's office. And just be really careful about that, and real cognizant of our filing practices, essentially. I also want to implement a blind justice filing policy, which would prevent the line deputies from knowing the suspect's race, because again, that ACLU report that came out, that I'm sure you're aware of, showed that Riverside County was pretty bad in that department. So we have to change that. Some other things, the ethics stuff is really, really important to me. So I want an independent ethics officer to be appointed, who sort of runs a committee, and any allegations of prosecutorial misconduct will be submitted to that ethics officer and investigated. And then there'll be transparency and accountability should they, should he find or she find any violations. I also want the ethics officer to lead trainings, so we're going to have significant training on prosecutorial misconduct, what it is, what it looks like, and just sort of ethics in general. And that person will be available also for prosecutors to call, with questions if they have sort of an on-the-spot decision to make in trial. So it's a really good idea for lots of reasons. Other things I want to do for crime prevention, I want to create a homeless task force that is going to combine public and private individuals in different agencies and service providers to kind of come together and figure out what we can do to prevent crime, to find services for the homeless who are, willing to get those services. I know there's this sort of idea, Mike Hestrin has talked about it before, that, oh no, they don't want, the services. Well, I have a different perspective because I've talked to a lot of them. I have friends who work with homeless foundations. And so I hear a different story. Again, my perspective is unique in that regard. And so I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to prevent the crime, and then also get individuals off the street who we can get off the street. We have to try. So I have some ideas in that department as well. I definitely want to work towards cash bail reform because it's a problem. It adds to our jail overcrowding. So it's a problem for lots of reasons, but it's really unjust. And we know why, because if somebody with money gets the same charge as somebody without money, the person with money gets out and the other person stays in. It's just a basic sort of fundamental issue. So what I want to do is work towards that. It's not going to happen overnight because we have the problem, the sort of practical problem that judges can preventively detain individuals. So we have to be cognizant of that issue and find ways of sort of dispelling the fears that judges have about releasing people, and find monitoring programs and find ways to do that. So I'll be working hard on that as well. And let's see what else.
Well, how about police accountability, since Hestern is notorious for taking money from law enforcement?
Lots of money, yes. So police accountability is not going to be an issue with me. There, somebody asked at the first debate, and I've done like 3 or 4 now. But the first one, they asked a question, well, how would you treat, a law enforcement officer accused of a crime? And my answer was, I would treat them like anybody else accused of a crime. I mean, I don't know why we have this idea that we have to treat them differently, right? If somebody's accused of the crime, did they commit a crime or not? It's just that the analysis is different, right? Because there's certain reasons that they might be able to use the force that they used or whatever. So there might be a defense of some sort, but law enforcement need to be treated, just like anybody else. They need to be treated with dignity and respect as well. And if they're innocent, I'm going to absolutely, want their exoneration. I won't, it's just the same as anybody else. It's like, if they didn't do anything wrong, they're safe with me, right? They're absolutely safe with me because I'm all for setting innocent people free. So I will go to bat for them 100%. But if they did something wrong, they need to be held accountable, because the public needs to know that we are going to prosecute law enforcement who abuse their power and who hurt people. I mean, that's really what it is. If they victimize somebody, then they committed a crime, then they need to be held responsible. There should be no fear by law enforcement of having me in office, because I'm going to fully support them 100%, give them all kinds of resources, whatever I can, training and support. But they will know that if they break the law, they're going to be held accountable. It's just the way it has to be. It's the only thing that's fair and the only thing that's right. So it's justice, right? That's what it is. So I don't really understand the whole idea. There was somebody in the audience who shook their head when I said I'm going to treat them like everybody else. Like there has to be some different analysis. I understand the law can be different, but again, they need to be treated like anybody else. If they're guilty, they need to be punished appropriately. If they're innocent, they're going to be set free, period. So obviously I don't take any money from law enforcement. I'm not going to take any money from law enforcement because I just feel that it's the appearance of bias, and it's just not good. It breaks down the public's trust, and we need to earn it back, and that's going to be a huge part of what I want to do too, is earn back that trust.
What would you say your biggest criticism of Hestrin is?
Well, you've heard me harp on the Costco shooting case, like a lot, probably. So if you're talking about, there's a lot of criticisms. I get it. It's nobody's perfect, but there's some things that I just can't get past. And one of those is the decision to convene a grand jury in the Costco shooting case. I do not believe that it should have gone to a grand jury. I believe he should have, filed charges, exactly what the attorney general filed. That's what I would have filed, given everything I know about the case. And, I criticize it because, again, it's sort of right in line with he doesn't want to prosecute law enforcement, and all that money that he gets from law enforcement, it looks really bad. It looks really like he's not being fair. So what we have is, this off-duty law enforcement officer who shoots Kenneth French and kills him, shoots his parents as well, severely injuring them, I think from 22 feet away at that point. And it's in a crowded Costco, by the way, which is problematic just in and of itself. And then we have, Mike Hestrin not filing charges, instead goes to a grand jury. So there's a no bill, no indictment. Now it's sealed. Now nobody gets to know what happened. Nobody gets to know what he asked for, right? What did he ask for? What did he go for the indictment? And nobody gets to see anything about it because it's completely sealed. And I have a problem with abusing the grand jury process or overutilizing it for various reasons. One of which is it sort of circumvents the preliminary hearing process in a felony. And the preliminary hearing process, right, is where it's a screening of the case, and the defense attorneys there gets to ask questions, gets to test the evidence and the witnesses, and it's a public hearing. So we're circumventing that, and now we've got like the secret proceeding because there's a no bill. So I have a problem with that. And then we see, what I've sort of said are the circumstantial evidence of the fact that he should have filed charges, which is number one, the officer was fired, right? Number two, the family had a federal jury come down in a wrongful death suit for $17 million. Okay, 17 million. And then number three, the attorney general files charges. So I just feel like that was, a big problem for me. And just watching that family suffer and not get justice. They were victims of violent crime and they didn't get justice. And so we're talking about, some tough on crime approach, but does that only apply when, it's not law enforcement that's accused, that kind of double standard. And then his response was that he did prosecute one law enforcement officer in his 2 terms. And that law enforcement officer's name was Oscar Rodriguez. And Oscar Rodriguez was initially cleared of murder charges. And only, I think, 3 years later, after a wrongful death suit revealed inculpatory evidence in a deposition, that's when he filed charges. So again, it's like, what's going on here? Are we not, really proactively trying to get justice for victims of violent crime when it's a law enforcement officer that's accused? Was the investigation unreliable, untrustworthy? Like, what's going on here? So that's the one that he did file against, but it was years later and initially cleared, So it's a little disingenuous to say, oh, I'm fair because I filed against this guy, is what I'm trying to say. So I guess that would be my biggest criticism, is he takes hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, maybe David, like maybe the number more than I do. I mean, I think it's it's got to be 1 million by now. I don't even know.
Just know in general, he took more money from law enforcement than any other DA, which is actually saying a whole lot because DAs take money from law enforcement. That's what they do, right? So if you're on top of that list, and it's not like Riverside's a small county or anything, but it's not LA either. So I mean, that says something.
It does. And I think at one point, you're talking about, Sacramento's DA. At one point, I think she was like the second most or something. It was, yeah. So I don't know. It's really troublesome for me. And it was troublesome the last time. And I talked about it at the debates in the last election. And, somebody asked me later, they're like, so what you're saying is that if law enforcement wanted to give you $500,000 for your campaign, you would say no. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's like, people can't believe, that I won't take money from law enforcement. It's like, look, number one, the money is an issue in and of itself, because I don't think we should be pouring this kind of money into political campaigns in a local DA race and a nonpartisan race. Why is it like that? First of all, it just bothers me. It's like every time I see these dollars, coming into, their disclosures and stuff, it's like, I just think, how many mouths can we feed with this money? Just like, it's, I don't know. I don't like it at all. So, no, I would not take that kind of money. I don't believe in it. I believe that things need to change. I believe in the voters too. I believe that people can see past, phony sort of taking money and I'm going to win because I just have the most commercials, So maybe that's a naive perspective, but it's the one that I have. I still have faith in the voters to make the right choices, and I'm just trying to get my message out there. Don't have as much money as those guys, but I'm doing what I can to get my message out there to let everybody know who I am, what I want to do, and that they can trust me to do it.
So if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
So the website, laragressley.com or lara4da.com, few different website names will redirect there, but laragressley.com is probably the best place. Social media, I'm on Facebook. I don't have a huge social media platform right now, but you'll find like links and stuff like that. Also YouTube, because apparently if you search me on YouTube, my debates will come up and stuff. So at least a few of them. And so those are probably the best places. And, I just think that it's time for change. And I really think that Riverside voters are ready. I think the citizens are ready for change here. 2.4 million people in this county. It's a huge county. Hard to get the message out, but I ran the last time and I did get, about 34% of the vote. I only campaigned for like 4 months in 2018 and raised, half of what I raised this time. And, I got almost 100,000 votes. So people are ready. They've proven that they're ready. And I believe that I am the right candidate out of the three for various reasons, not the least of which is that I am the only one who has ever been a defense attorney. I have never been part of that, what I believe is a toxic win at all cost culture in the Riverside DA's office. I've never been in that environment. I've always had the freedom to do absolutely what is right. And I believe that says a lot. And I have innovative, perspective. I have innovative approaches because I have that unique perspective. So I can see problems that they can't see. Which means
we are out of time. But I wanted to thank you for coming on our show. Lara Gressley, who's running for DA in Riverside County. This has been Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald. Join us again next time for more tales from the injustice system.